Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Type 35 build, and our continued coverage of the tiny little detail Olympics. The first competitor, a relative newcomer to the games, would be the crankshaft position sensor bracket, which has had some fancy new standoffs to maintain its spacing relative to the crank trigger wheel. So now the sensor and the wheel should get along much better than before, which probably would have been about as well as two siblings on a cross-country road trip. I thought about snazzing up the bracket a bit with some speed holes. I thought one or two. I thought it might look cool. Then I thought, no, might look too busy. Then I moved on altogether to the oxygen sensor, which is actually on the driver's side of the car, but its harness is over here. I got it ran, and if you look under the passenger's motor mount, you can just make out the electrical connector. And the wire, I fit some clamps so it'd run right along the bottom of the block. Then it dives down into a small notch in the oil pan and across to the sensor. It ends up kinda hidden in plain sight. When you stand back and look, like the rest of the electrical, it just disappears into the darkness. A couple more clamps to keep everything in its place, and this is about what the finished engine compartment will look like. Shockingly free of distracting electrical wiring. Oh, and speaking of disappearing electronics, this is too cool. In case you didn't know, this is the dash. Dash, this is everyone. Oh, but does Dash have a secret? I really want the technological components on the car hidden and the mechanical components displayed because I think making the tech too obvious ruins the vintage appeal of the car. But the fuel injection system has a touch screen that I did not want to mount to the dash. So what I did was gave the car a really neat party trick. How cool is that? Totally vintage looking, then ta-da! Flip down the screen and welcome to the 21st century. If we look under the dash, you can see the touchscreen panel and the car's relay box. I flushed them up under the dash so they're hidden, but like the relay box, accessible so if any of the relays for the fuel pump, headlights, turn signals, that's the round silver one there, need to be replaced, it's just a matter of reaching up and swapping it out. Both the relay and the flip screen box bolt in, so changes can be made later if need be, but if we look really deep, up behind the touch screen, there's a USB port up behind it. So this is the communication port for the ignition system. A tablet or a laptop will plug in here and allow access to the ignition's operating system so it can be tuned to suit the motor. I figure if you need to tune the ignition, you'll probably have the injection screen flip down too, and on a normal drive where it's not needed, it's hidden back up under the flip screen. Both completely out of sight. And if a touch screen you can flop down whenever you want isn't cool enough, you can see the hinge plate is mounted to a pair of friction hinges. So when the screen isn't needed, it rotates back, and when the lead gets secured to the hinge plate, the screen will rotate up under the dash real slick-like and hold itself in place without any mechanical fasteners, which is pretty awesome. And the action of the hinges is surprisingly smooth. With access to the electronics tucked up in the underdash like this, it keeps everything accessible without cluttering the dash panel itself. Also under the dash is the accelerator pedal, though obviously not hidden from sight, but it has been made just a little bit cooler because the pedal kit I bought was black powder coated, and that included the throttle lever that I mounted on the top of the firewall, which though, totally clashed and was quite a bit longer than it needed to be. So I cut the lever down to a more appropriate length. Oh, and I modified the set screws, which just used friction to hold the levers to the shaft. That was no bueno. So I drilled into the throttle shaft and extended the screws down so the lever and the shaft can't rotate independently. And I used longer screws so if their socket ever gets stripped out, they can be turned out with a pair of needle nose pliers. Bummer was, with the cut down lever, I was left with a funny I shape on the top of the lever. So I ground a taper into the ribs onto the perimeter of the lever, rounded the top, and it didn't come out looking too bad. Then I stripped the black powder coating off and it came out looking a whole lot better. As neat looking as the passenger's lever came out though, the driver's side is really cool looking too. So this is the accelerator pedal, or the top of it at any rate. It extends into the passenger's compartment. The set screw's been countersunk just like the opposite side. Bare aluminum, everything's same. And both match each other until you get a look down into the footwell. The accelerator pedal is still black to match the black finish on the brake and clutch pedals because things can't clash, people. So this isn't the most elaborate trick, but if you look really close, I masked off the pedal and only stripped the powder coating that was visible from the engine compartment. You can see the line on the pedal arm just below the firewall, but when you stand back, it disappears below the panel like a shadow, which is really kind of a neat effect. Raw aluminum on the top, but not on the bottom. I like having the accelerator black to match the other pedals. Probably another touch no one but me will ever see, but one of those details that, added up, I think will give the car a much more finished appearance. Oh, another little detail? Comically little, actually. I got the battery installed. Isn't it just the cutest little thing you've ever seen? Battery technology's come a long way since the original Type 35s were made. This is a dry cell, well, absorbed gas mat battery that, despite its diminutive size, puts out enough cold cranking amps that it should be able to start the motor without a problem. Given its small size, I thought fitting it under the seat would be cool. Hidden, but easy to get to. And what would be a more appropriate way to mount a baby-sized battery than in a cradle? So, I used some 1-inch angle, bent and welded it into a base for the battery to sit into, then welded a pair of braces to either side. These bolt to a pair of tabs that I welded onto the seat frame that keep the battery about 1/8 of an inch off the floor pan, which I did because I didn't want the battery mounted to the floor. The entire cradle unbolts from the tabs, so any modifications, or if the battery size needs to be changed later, I can just unbolt it and modify as necessary. The hold down still needs to be tended to, which I've got an idea for, but for now, I finished it up with some speed holes in the side braces because something had to get some speed holes. And that about covers everything I can think of. Electronics are in, wiring is ran, battery is hooked up. Actually, come to think of it, about the only thing left to do is